me just... What button do I press? Aha! There we go. Hello! Hello world. Welcome. Today I am going to attempt to go over these sort of very, very basics of web development. In fact, I have a plan laid out. I have 3 episodes planned for this series so far. First, we're going to go over basic HTML and CSS, the very, very core of what you need to know to get a website on the internet, what a website even is. Next, we're going to go into sort of advanced, more advanced stuff, scripting, which allows you to do stuff with your website, make your website do things other than just sit there and display information, react to users' input. And third, we're going to go over how the internet works as a whole. So the communication between your computer and the computers of the companies whose websites you visit, and how you can use that to your advantage. But first, we're going to go over the very, very basics. Now, if you've never programmed before, welcome, you're in the right place. I'm going to try to go slow, but feel free to ask questions in chat. If you have programmed before, I'm going to start out using Notepad, which you'll know is not a very good text editor, but I want to go over some of the basics before I go over tooling and text editors and things of that nature. So, without further ado, what the heck is a website? Let's get a window up here. Like if I go to google.com, how do I make this thing? How do I even begin? I don't even know how to start. Like, if I just look at the news, what does one do? What is the magic behind this thing that allows me to control what I show and how I show it? And the answer is a language called HTML. I'll leave that there. HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And at its core, every website is just text. And I have a really cool demo I can show you. It's very easy to make a very simple website just immediately. We're going to do one in the next 5 minutes, but first I must go over one additional thing. It is called a tag. So HTML, the Hypertext Markup Language, is made up entirely of tags. What is a tag? A tag is just a word that is enclosed by 2 brackets. And usually, not always, tags have like an opening tag, which is just the name of the tag, and a closing tag, which is the name of the tag with a slash before it, just like this. Now, there is no tag called tag. That is something I just made up. But while we're here, we might as well start making our first website. If you're watching along at home, Twitch tells me there are 3 of you. Feel free to follow along. If you're on Windows, I'm in Notepad. You can get to that by opening the Start menu and typing Notepad. If you're on Mac, you can use TextEdit. And if you're on Linux, I assume you know what your text editor of preference is. Anyway, moving on. So the first tag we need to know about is the HTML tag. The HTML tag is going to contain everything in our website, the whole thing. It's always the first or second tag at the top, and the closing tag is the last tag at the bottom. And I'll go into more depth on like how to structure a web page in the future, but for now, just sort of go with it. Then we have the head tag, which is absolutely necessary, and we have the body tag. And the body tag is where we're going to put all of our content, but before we do that, we need the head tag. So the head tag describes information about your website that your web browser, which is Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer, or Edge or whatever, it describes to your browser certain things about the website. Things like, for example, what to display at the very top of the tab. This is known as the title, and it's defined in the head tag. This is called the favicon, and it is also defined in the head tag, but we're just going to define title for now. So that's title. You'll note I've tabbed in. We in programming use tabs to keep track of what is contained within what else. In HTML, it's common to see the head and body tags all the way left, even though they're contained in the HTML tag, just because every website has them and it makes it a little bit easier to read. But we can be semantic here if we want, just to make it very clear. Title. We'll call this our learning website. That's kind of a lame title. We'll call it the best website ever. Cool. I'm happy with that. All right. And the next tag I want to show you, and I'll go into more tags soon, and I will enumerate them and write them down and stuff. But just bear with me for a moment. The next tag I'm going to show you is called H1. And this H1 simply refers to what's known as a header, which is different than the head. They're different. But there are 6 H tags, H1 through H6. And H1 is supposed to be the most important text on the page. And then H2 is supposed to be maybe a subtitle or something, and then H3 can be a subtitle below that, or if you have like, you know, a document tree. But well, let's just take a look, and I'll show you what that looks like. Let me just make an H2 so we can take a look real quick. All right. So now, believe it or not, we've actually made a functional, if somewhat bare bones, website. So you can go ahead and save this, and make sure you save it. I have a folder going for this project. Make sure when you save it, at least if you're using Notepad, you swap down to all files and name it anything. It doesn't actually matter what you name it at the beginning. I'll call this learning1.html. That is the important part. You need to make sure that you save it with a .html at the end. Now if I hit save, learning1.html, I can very quickly go to it. And you'll notice, now that it has .html at the end, the icon next to it, instead of being a text edit icon, is the icon of whatever your browser of choice is. So if you double click on it, there's our website. There we go. And as I mentioned, the H tags are meant for the important text on your page, the title and subtitle. So naturally, the H1, the big title, is going to be bigger than the subtitle. And if we go on over to our text editor, we can define an H3, subtitle, and it will be even smaller. So I should explain what I did. So every time you make a change, you want to save your document. I have a keyboard shortcut, Control-S, and then go back over to the web browser and hit refresh, or in most browsers, that's F5 on the keyboard. Anyway, back to programming. Let me check my notes here. We've gone over what is HTML, what is a tag, what is an attribute. Ooh, all right. So the next thing we need to know is what an attribute is. We're going real fast. Feel free to holler in chat to slow down. So, tags alone are pretty boring. Like, as you can see, this is a pretty boring website. And obviously, most websites don't look like this. So how do we make them look different? Well, the first thing you do to assign additional information to a tag is with an attribute. And attributes are simply added on to tags, like so. Let me go. Let's introduce a new tag so that we can show this in a very natural way. The tag we're about to introduce is called the A tag. And the A tag is for links. This is a link. Now, an A tag alone, also don't ask me why it's called A. I don't know why. There's also a link tag, but it's actually unrelated and not what you use to make a clickable link, which is kind of crazy, but whatever. An A tag alone can't be a link because when you have a link, you need text that the link is and you need to tell your browser where to go when you click the link. And right now, we haven't told it that. So for an A tag, you need the href attribute. And so attributes just look like this. It's the name of the attribute, an equal sign, and the value of the attribute in quotation marks. So let's take this link to my website, or we can go to google.com or something. Let's go ahead and save. Actually, to Google. Let's be descriptive. Save it. Refresh the page. And if we click the link, we did it. Well, yeah, we did it. Yay, we're done. Congratulations. Go make a website. Just kidding. We have a lot more to learn. Okay, so this is an attribute. This is very important, and we'll be using this quite a bit soon. Very, very soon. But first, let me consult my notes. I'll move these over to my other screen so you don't have to look at them. Essential tags. I've gone over the head tag, which contains the information your browser wants to display the page more completely. Oh, yeah, so we said title. Title goes right up there at the top of the tab. We've gone over the title tag, H1 through H6. I'm not going to type them all out, just trust me, there's 6 of them and they get progressively smaller as you go down. P, okay. So what if you have text that is not a heading or a link? You just want plain old text. Well, that is traditionally represented by the P tag, which is a paragraph. Is a paragraph. So every paragraph gets a P tag, and you can actually put links inside of paragraphs, which makes sense. We've seen that before all over the place. But in A is what we call a line level element, meaning you can place it within a paragraph, and it won't interrupt the flow of text. A P and an H1 and an H2 are what we call block level elements, which generally means they get their own line. So if you put a block level element inside of something else or next to something else, instead of being next to it, it will go below. And I can demonstrate that right now. If we place this link inside of a paragraph, it'll go, it's a little ugly, but it'll go right inside that paragraph without wrapping to a new line. See? But we can't actually put a paragraph within a paragraph. That doesn't make any sense. But if I were to put H2, also doesn't make sense to put this inside of a paragraph. But if I were to do this, which is wrong, do not do this in the real world, you'll see it gets its own line because it is a block level element. So yes. So the next question is, one, are there more elements, more tags? The answer is yes. I'll go over more of them in the future, but I'll also be going over where to find information about the other tags, because there are tags that I won't be covering. And the other question is, how do I make my website look good? Because this, you know, it's an aesthetic. It's something that I'm sure some people appreciate, but it's not, it doesn't look good by any stretch of the imagination. And the answer to that question, at least, is with the style tag. One of my favorite tags. And I see we now have 4 viewers. If you're just joining us, feel free to follow along in Notepad or post any questions you might have in chat. So the style tag is where we put what's known as CSS, or cascading style sheets. In fact, before I continue, I'm going to start using my website to actually take notes for us, because what else? Why not, right? I'll call this H3, H2, CSS. just do this real quickly. Describes the structure of a document on the web /h2. All right. There is no h21. So, how do we actually use the style tag? Well, what we do is we describe something that we'd like to style, and then we describe how we'd like to style it. And the way that works is by simply declaring an element. Let's say I wanted to style every h2 on the page. I can simply say h2 and then put some curly braces in. So, you can see why people tend to prefer outdenting the head and body tags, because you end up tabbed over a million lines, or a million columns rather. Let's make our h2s green. We simply can say color, green. And now you can see, if we save, go back to Firefox and refresh, our h2s are now green. We've done it. Let's say we wanted to make the font a little nicer. Font family. Oh, let's go with a nice Arial. So you can see the syntax here is selector is what that's called, where you define what you'd like to style. An open curly brace, property, the property you'd like to change, a colon, and then the value you would like to set it to, and then a semicolon. That is important. That syntax will bite you in the butt if you forget it. Okay, so we've changed our font. We could go even crazier if we wanted. I don't think Windows computers have Helvetica, do they? The famous, they do not, so they fall back to Arial. So Arial's fine for now. So that's essentially how we start to build up complexity, is by combining elements and styling until we can get further and further. And I just have one more thing to talk about before we get into editor tooling and how to make this a lot more convenient to write. And that one thing I have to talk about is the box model. So, actually, I'm just going to nuke this, whatever. The tag we need to talk about right now is the div. So what is a div? That's a good question. For demonstration, I'm going to make a paragraph. This paragraph is outside the div. I'm going to make another paragraph. This paragraph is inside a div. All right. It looks the exact same, doesn't it? And that's the point. You see, a div on its own does nothing. A div is just an empty box to contain other things. A div can be whatever you want it. A div is how we control the layout. It is just a box that we can stuff with things, and we can stuff with other divs, and that's how we make things look nice. And so the way we control the layout of divs is with the box model. Now, if you want to see divs in action, I really like the New York Times website because it's very easy to demonstrate. It's much more complex than this, and I'll show you how to actually look through it in the near future. But just take for a moment the fact that you've got like a box of stuff here, and you've got like a box of stuff here, and you've got boxes of stuff over here. And the way you do boxes of stuff is just with divs, and that's just how you do it. That's how you group stuff together. So, let's do some basic diving, shall we? First of all, let's make our divs visible. Div background color. So the color attribute we used earlier is for font color. Background color, so the background, we'll make it yellow. A nice bright yellow. And also, if you're wondering idly to yourself, like, how do I choose what shade of yellow? I'll show you that in a moment as well. So now we can actually see where the div is. Let's do some stuff to it. Let's go max. We can define a width, 50%. And we can do this thing called margin auto. Well, let's not go over margin auto yet. Let's just do width 50%. Okay, so that made it take up exactly half of the screen. We can do some more. We can say padding 30 pixels. And what that's going to do is that's going to create space in between the edge of the element and the content within it. That's known as padding. That's one of the two essential components of the box model. The other essential component is margin. So padding, if padding is between the content and the edge of a component. Oh, pity you don't teach Java. I can teach Java. I've been thinking about doing that. And you know what? I just might. Anyway, back to what I was saying. I'll get into this in a moment. Margin. So if padding is between the content of a div and the edge of a div, margin is between the edge of a div and everything around it. So let me just show that. So right now this has the default margin, and if I save it, go back over here and refresh, you'll notice that I've inserted space around the outside of the div. So padding, margin, those are two very important concepts that as you're learning HTML and grappling with how to lay things out are going to drive you freaking insane. But that's okay. They drive us all insane. And before I continue teaching, I'd like to take a quick aside and say that no programmer actually programs in HTML. Or excuse me, everyone programs in HTML. No one programs in Notepad. This is a pain in the butt, like just dealing with Notepad. So if I were you, I would download a programming text editor. The one that I really like is Visual Studio Code. Don't forget to stay hydrated, friends. You can download it and install it, and it'll give you a nice, pleasant environment to work in. That's what I was using to take my notes. And it does a couple things. For one, it syntax highlights, so you can clearly see stuff. Gives you little previews over here. Gives you a little color picker, which is nice. But I promised to go over colors, so I will go over colors. I still will. And it gives you this neat little tool called Emmet. And what Emmet does is truly incredible, because what I can do is I can just type the name of the name of any element. I can just say div, hit tab, and it will expand it out for me. And be like p tab, boom, there it is. This is a nested div. Also, my cursor is off. Looks like my cursor is in like the wrong spot. Huh, that's interesting. But now, we go back over here. You can see that I have a div within a div. So I highly recommend downloading Visual Studio Code, just because I don't want to teach a whole bunch of programming before I teach you how to actually apply it in the real world. And if you're programming in the real world, you're going to want a tool. The other thing I'd like to do before we continue is install Node. Now, I don't actually have Node on this computer. I guess I should explain what Node is. So there are three languages we're going to learn in this series: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, you've seen HTML. We've briefly touched on CSS in the style tag. The third thing we're going to go over is JavaScript, and that is how you make your website interactive. And there is a way to run JavaScript outside of a web browser, and that way is called Node. And I don't want to get into too much detail into what it is, because we're going to use it in episode 3. But for now, we need it for a really cool tool that's going to make our life a heck of a lot easier. So just Google Node.js. Wait, let me just double check that I actually don't have Node. Yeah, I don't have Node. Cool. So we get to do this together. If you're watching this later on YouTube, I will put a link to skip ahead if you're already a web developer or you're already some other developer and you already know how to do all these things. But I like to cater to the beginner, because why not? Windows installer. All right. Save. If you have Chrome, it'll show up in the bottom left corner like it always does. All right, next, whatever. Okay, so the other thing it's going to give us is npm, which we are about to use immediately. So make sure that gets installed and make sure it gets added to path as well. So make sure you have the little, the plain icon instead of one of the weirder icons. Checkboxes are easier IMO, but whatever. So while we're waiting, if there's interest in a Java course, I'd totally be willing to teach it. I know it's the language that people teach in like intro to computer science courses. At least it is at Arizona State University where I go. But it's a really good middle ground between different things different languages and patterns and paradigms that programmers like to use. Java is a good starting point, so I can totally teach that. In fact, I'm planning on streaming every Saturday. I might just set aside a Saturday for Java. We'll see. Okay, so we've just installed Node, but what the heck? Where did it go? You know, like if we type in Node, there's like an app, but like we don't want to use that. No. To interact with Node, you're going to use a feature of your computer called the command line interface. And basically the idea here is that instead of telling your computer what to do by clicking on things, by clicking on buttons, you're going to tell your computer what to do by typing. And the great thing about that is that typing is just text. So you could really, really easily automate the things that you type to happen automatically. So to get to the command line environment on Windows, you're going to open the start menu and type cmd. I actually use PowerShell myself, but cmd is the common one, so that's the one we'll be teaching. If you're on a Mac, I might have misspoken earlier. If you're on Windows, use cmd. If you're on Mac, you're going to use an app called Terminal, and you can get to that by hitting Command space and typing Terminal and opening it. Same deal though. We're going to type Node. And here we have a JavaScript prompt, which I just realized I want to teach you how to use right now. So .exit to exit. What we really want is npm. npm is the Node package manager. And what it does is it allows you to download other people's code so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We are going to do something very specific. For now, just copy this command as is. I'll go more into the syntax and how to use npm in the future, or you can Google it. npm install -g lite-server. We're downloading a package called Lite Server, and what that's going to do is it's going to make our life a million times easier as we're working. Hit enter, watch it do its thing. Feel free to tell me to slow down or stop in the comments in the Twitch chat. If you guys are following along, that's great. If you're not following along, that's fine too. If I'm just on in the background, whatever. All right, it's here. So, assuming you have Visual Studio Code installed, we are ready to heavily automate our workflow. So I have my HTML file open in Visual Studio Code. If you don't have it open already, you can just do File, Open File, or open the folder it's in, assuming you saved it somewhere. People like to save it on their desktop. That seems common. If you press Control P, it lets you go through files that are in that folder. If you press Shift Control P, it lets you type commands, or Shift Command P and Command P if you're on Mac. And the terminal we need, or the command we need, is toggle integrated terminal. So hit enter. Excuse me. It's going to pull up a terminal for us, which is great. And we're just going to run lite-server. Really? That's interesting. Oh, I've made a mistake. Hold on, guys. I need to move this folder to somewhere else. There's a mild limitation with npm on Windows that is messing me up. So let me just open folder. Sorry about this. We'll be done in a moment and back to learning. Light-server. What? Okay. So if you're apparently see Chuckteries, that's interesting. I'm really wondering why that is the case. But we know that light server is in this window we have up here, so we're going to use this one. Before I go further, I just need to introduce you to the command line just a little bit. Whenever you enter commands, the context that you enter commands in is known as the working directory. So there are commands like create a file and delete a file and things like that, and all those things happen within the context of a folder. You're always looking at a folder. So in Windows, pwd or cwd, I'm sorry, I don't use Windows that often. That's okay. You can see what directory we're in. On the left, we're in the users/chuckteries folder. I feel like my stream has really gone off the rails. I'm sorry if this is making less and less sense and becoming less and less interesting, but anyway, the command to change directory, to move folders, is cd. So we are going to use that. We're going to cd into wherever your folder is. For me, I have all my files saved under desktop basic web development cast, and if you open it in Explorer and you click up here, you can actually see the actual path. So if you just copy that, well, actually, you don't want to copy anything with spaces in it, so we're just going to type it by hand. That's okay, but you can note what it is. C users chuckteries desktop basic web development cast. So we're going to cd, we're in C users chuckteries, so we're close. Cd into desktop. Now we don't have to type all the way, we can type most of it and hit tab, and it will fill in the rest. cd base. There we go. And now we're here. Now, the command to figure out what is in the folder is called dir. And we can see that we have learning1.html, notes.md, and a folder called pictures. And there we go. So now if we run light server, it should just work. There we go. Aha! And of course, it's looks like the scary error, but if you simply type in, what did we call it? learning1.html. Ha! We're here. So this is our website. I should note why that error happened. By default, most web servers, this program we're running is called a web server, which simply means it's software that delivers a website from one computer to another computer that asks for it, and I'll get more into that in episode 3. Usually there's what's known as an index file, which is the default file you serve if it doesn't ask for a file. And in browsers, in light server's case, the index file is index.html. You can see it tried to get it, but it returned a 404, which I'm sure you've seen in the past on like other websites. 404 is the file not found error code. So anyway, so localhost :3000/ the name of your file.html, and we'll get more into URLs and things like that in the near future. But so we started out just making a plain old text file and simply renaming it with a .html and opening it in a browser to get to it. We've learned some basic syntax. We've learned that there are better tools than Notepad to type text. And we've now gone into some very, very basic developer tooling, because developers in the real world aren't going to sit there and manually tab over Notepad documents and things like that. No, no, no. So now that we've got a nicer setup going, we can continue. I'm a little bit distracted. What was my next task? Tooling, getting help. Okay, where do you go to get help for this sort of thing? Well, you can Google things, and that's actually a great resource. So like HTML A tag will get you to a W3 Schools article about how to use it. However, personally, I'm a big fan of MDN. MDN is the Mozilla Developer Network, and their documentation is unparalleled. If you ever need help, Google is your friend, but just know that if you want like an official reference on the correct way to do things, it's MDN. But yeah, one of the best skills you're going to learn is how to Google things. So, moving on, let's build more stuff. Let's make more tags. Okay, so I promised I'd tell you how colors work, and I will. So there are 3 different ways to do colors. The sort of most simple way, if you're hand typing, is with hex codes, and that goes hashtag number. And you may be thinking, well, what the heck are the numbers? Well, they're actually not numbers. They're hexadecimal numbers, which means if we're talking about standard numbers, our normal number system goes 0 through 9, which is 10. It's base 10. That's just like how numbers work in this world, at least. But hexadecimal numbers go 0 through 15. There are 16 options. So the way we represent that is 0 through 9, and then A through F. So 9 is 9, 10 is A, 11 is B, etc., etc., etc. So these hex codes have 2 values for red, 2 values for green, and 2 values for blue. 0 through 9, A through F. So if I wanted something white, I guess I need to just a hint of color theory. In screens, at least, colors are represented by values of red, green, and blue, and by combining any amount of that red, green, and blue, you can make any color you can see with your eyes, at least in theory. So let's just say white is FF, 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 which is the highest value you can, right? And then we can go over here and refresh, and in theory, it should update for us. And I'm a little bit confused as to why it's stuck loading, to be honest. I'm not really sure what's happening here. I usually work on Linux. I'm not a big Windows person, so that's why I didn't have everything quite set up. Disconnected from browser sync. That's really interesting. Oh, now it works. Okay. Who knows why that happened? But we should be good. Connected to browser sync. Okay. The demo I was trying to show you is that let's go like E is kind of a sort of subdued white. Is that when we make changes and hit save, it should automatically refresh the browser, which it appears to be working now. I don't know why it didn't work before. Background color. The other way to do color is with straight up RGB values, and these values go between 0 and 255. So if we go like 100, 100, 100, that's going to give us a nice muddy gray. And the third way to do color is with HSL, which is hue, saturation, lightness. And honestly, I don't know enough about it to tell you off the top of my head. It's not used very common. But if you need a color, I recommend just Googling color picker, because you can just like pick a color. That's a nice color, and you just straight up just copy the code and just like paste it, and it works. Pink. Let's make our divs a little easier to see before we continue. So that color is a little obnoxious. We can tone it down a little bit. There we go. Let's see. All right. And let's get a nice dark gray for the border. All right. So the next thing you should know is border, the CSS property border. Now border has 3 things you need to define: the style, the weight, which is the thickness, and the color. And the shorthand for that is just border. You can do border style, border weight or border thickness, border color. I don't remember what the property is because I just used the shorthand. The shorthand goes style, weight, color in that order. So, or excuse me, thickness. Let's just try it. Let's see if it works. I always have to Google it. 1px solid, that color. That appears to have worked. So I suppose that's the right way. It goes weight, style, color. You can Google it. Shorthand. Width, style, color. Here you go, right here. MDN says it best. I imagine the stream is getting less and less interesting. If you're just joining us, basically what we've done is we've created a text file in Notepad initially, but now I'm using a real code editor, which is called Visual Studio Code. You can download it. But you can use any text editor. You open a new file in Notepad, save it with a .html, and just open it in your browser, and it will be a website. A website is made up of a language called HTML, and in HTML we have tags, which are just words with brackets around them, and usually you have an opening tag and a closing tag, like for the HTML tag. And there are various tags, and we've gone over what they do, and you should just Google it if you need to know specifically what a given tag does. But know that every website on the planet starts with an HTML tag, ends with an HTML tag, has a head tag, and an end head tag, has a body tag, and an end body tag. Cool. You're caught up, the two people that joined us. Welcome. We've gone over style, which is in a language known as CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And we've gone over some of the basic properties of style. All right, so now we need to talk more about style, specifically with selectors. How exactly do I tell what tag I want to style? So this will style every div, but what if I only wanted the inside div to have a border? What if I only wanted the inner div to have like a different background color? Well, there's a couple different ways to do this. And to differentiate them, let me just copy this. Oh, here's another thing. If you ever screw up the formatting, Shift-Control-P and type format document. It'll clean it up a little bit for you. Anyway, let's say I just wanted to style this div. There's two attributes we need to know, class and ID. I'm going to go over class first. A class is generally used if you need to style a bunch of similar things. We'll call it outer div. So let's say we had a list of buttons or something, you wanted them all to look the same. This is how you would do that. And then if you give something a class, a group of things a class, you can reference that class with a dot and then the class name in CSS. So now let's say background color hashtag, and I'm just going to use Visual Studio Code's built-in color picker to choose a nice orange, I suppose. And so there you go. The divs that I've given the class of outer div get that orange background color, but any div that isn't an outer div does not. Whoops. That's interesting. Why has that happened? Oh, because I changed the... it reverted my color change. That's interesting. Wonder why I did that. Anyway, as you can see, this div is not a .outer div, so it doesn't get one. This div down here gets no color, or it doesn't get that orange color because it's not an outer div. Simple enough, right? The class attribute is that simple. Now, if you have one specific unique element you need to reference, but only one can appear on a page, we call that an ID. So an ID is for referencing unique elements by name. A class is for groups of similar elements. So let's say ID equals third div. So we reference IDs in our style tag with a hashtag and the name of the ID. Let's say background color. Let's get a nice green. So that is probably too bright of a color green in my opinion. Let's go it's probably fine. Oh, that's cool. I have to apologize. They just introduced the built-in color picker like really recently, and I haven't really used it since. Anyway, so now you can see this one gets that color green. And that's pretty straightforward. So you've seen how attributes come into play and are very handy. You've seen CSS selectors. We've gone over the head tag. We need the link and meta, span, UL, LI, and IMG. Okay, cool. So let's clean up our mess a little bit. Just gonna nuke these. And I'm gonna show you another sort of industry insider trick called lorem ipsum. Whenever you need to just get like dummy text to test out a website, that is how we do it. So let's just get like 5 paragraphs of this nonsense Latin text. Well, we only really need 1 paragraph. And let's plop it in a paragraph tag. All right. Scroll back over, and let's go ahead and copy that line and, you know, paste it a couple times just so we have some paragraphs to work with. And if you know, this looks bad. I don't like reading text. I don't like Wikipedia style, you know, having to follow a single line of text across a page. So whoops, whoa. I'm just trying to do that. There we go. And that. Cool. So first thing I like to do on any thing that I do, at least in a simple way, is I like to say paragraph max width of like 600 pixels and margin auto. Now we've gone over margin a little bit before, but margin auto will automatically determine the left and right margins to center a thing within something else. And if we do this to the body, it will do the entire page. So that already looks a lot better. Another default I like to set is line height to 1.5. Just give your text a little room to breathe. Background, I'm not a huge fan of white on black, like pure white on black. So let's give it a background of, which is sort of a subdued gray. And let's give it a color, which is a sort of subdued gray. Let's go ahead and define a margin top as well. 50 pixels should be good. Move things down a little. And already our website's looking great. But I promised I'd go over some more tags, and I will. So the first tag, I'm actually going to work backwards on this. First tag I want to go over is image. The IMG tag, well, let Emmett do it. So the IMG tag is for putting pictures in, and fundamentally any HTML page is going to use IMG tags to put pictures in, or it's going to use divs with background images, but we'll get into more advanced techniques like that in the future. But the IMG tag has 2 required attributes. One of them is src, source, which is where the image is, and the other one is alt, which is if the image doesn't load or if the person's blind or something, what text to display instead of that image. So let me go ahead and see where I put a picture. I have a folder called pictures and a picture called mountains.jpg. So I'm just gonna, for source, put a pictures/mountains.jpg. And of course, all these paths can be either absolute URLs, http:// whatever, or relative to where your HTML file is, but only those 2 things. Save. So now we have this big picture. It's far too big. So let's constrain it. IMG max width. Now, why am I setting max width versus width? Well, because if you set width, then somebody on a phone, if your width is wider than the phone screen, someone on the phone is going to have to scroll left and right, and you don't want that. So I generally prefer to set a max width on things, unless I'm getting really complex with layouts, in which case I'll manually set a width, but I'll set multiple different widths for different size screens. But we don't have to worry about that. Let's say max width, let's make it 400 pixels. There we go. We can make it the same as the other. That looks kind of nice, doesn't it? I don't know. I like it. So, yeah. That's an image. And then Alt, a picture of mountains. And again, we want this in case the image doesn't load. So, for example, if the image file name is wrong, you get a description of the text of the image instead of just nothing at all. And there we go. Also, there's another attribute called title equals. The title is the text that appears when you hover over it. So if you say something like mountains, usually this is used to like add further context, but it's not very popular anymore because a lot of people visit websites on devices that don't have mice. So there you go. But I figured I might mention it just because it is an attribute that is commonly found. All right. What about bulleted lists? So you've got two ways to do lists in HTML. You've got UL and you've got OL, but I'll go over UL first. UL is an unordered list, which is just bullet points, and every list item in an unordered list or an ordered list is a list item, LI. Test. So you can see this is a bulleted list. There's only one item in it, but we can add more. In fact, if you're following along at home in Visual Studio Code or any other editor that has bracket or emmet in it, you can do li times 5 to get 5 list elements. Test 2. Look at that beautiful list. We're learning so much already. But let's say you want a list with numbers on it. That's pretty simple. That's just an OL, an ordered list. There you go. That's, I mean, heck, it's pretty simple, right? So we've gone over a lot of the basics of HTML. Now, oftentimes, websites get really complex. Like, let's just take a look. Oh, yeah, I was going to talk about this anyway. Oftentimes, the structure of a website gets extremely complex, and you get really deep nested divs and things like that. And there are reasons for that. And as you get more experience writing HTML, you'll sort of start to see why. But I was going to show you. Ooh, I got to go over head and link and meta. I'll go over those in a hot minute. But first, I want to show you inspector use. And so the way you can tease apart this complexity and both check for errors in your own work, and when you see an obvious error, look for where that error is, and the way you can learn from other people's work is with the web inspector. So let's just go full screen on this really quickly. Make sure this is off. All right, so if I want to know about how a website is structured, I can right-click on anything in that website and click Inspect Element, and it's pretty much the same in Chrome. I'm using Firefox, although I should probably use Chrome. It's more popular, at least for tutorials. But what can I say? I'm a Firefox fan. And you get something that looks a little bit like this, and this looks very familiar. It's a bunch of tags, right? This is the code that's making the website you're seeing in front of you. I'm not really used to it being this cramped because my screen's actually huge, but I have everything zoomed in so that you can see like what I'm typing on Twitch. But the basic gist is you can click around on elements. You can press this button, and there's a very similar looking button in Chrome to like click on an element and see exactly what's in it. And you can see how the way they accomplish these layouts is by doing divs. You can see that like this guy up here has a div layout, split layout, which has 2 columns, which are both divs. Each column gets a region and a collection. Looks like collection is for each story. Let's see. Yes, each story is a collection, what they've called it. And yeah, so that's how they do it. That's how HTML, that's how the West was won. That's how HTML in general is written. I haven't shown you any sort of advanced techniques yet, but I hope you have at least a very basic understanding of how things work. Really quickly before I go, I'd like to show you some tags that are important but not essential. So right now we've just been writing all of our style in line, right? We're putting all of our style right in the head. There's a different way to do this that is generally accepted as better, especially when you get to really, really large documents. It becomes sort of unmanageable to keep all the styles in here. You can put them in a separate file, and I'm going to do that now. So I'm just going to really quickly make a new file called style.css. I'm going to take all of our styles and place them in here, format the document, save it, and I'm going to nuke this style section. So now, of course, if I go back and look, we can close that tab, we can close that tab. Our website is no longer pretty. It's all gross again. The way we link the style file into the HTML file is with a link tag. So a link tag can pull in multiple different types of things. The most common is a style sheet. So the rel attribute says, what am I pulling in? A style sheet. Relation, I think, is what that stands for. And href is what it's linked, where the style sheet is. Now, this thing's always puzzled me. So earlier when we were making links, when we were making like links, like a Google, you know, href equals. When we were making this type of link, you know, this type of link where you click it and it goes somewhere, we used a href, but image uses src for source. What the difference between href and source is, I don't know, but some things use href, some things use source. You're going to have to memorize what uses what, and it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's the way the world is. I don't know. There's a lot of weird quirks about HTML that you'll learn eventually. Anyway, href style.css, which is just the name of the file. If I save it, I go back. Aha! It has loaded all of our styles. Beautiful. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Link. And I need to show you a couple other tags, but frankly, these are tags I always have to Google when I'm getting started. So we're gonna cheat a little bit. I'm gonna cheat a little bit. All right, so let's make a new file called learning2.html. And also, by the way, whenever you make a website, it's good practice to just name your files index.html, but I wasn't really sure what file I wanted, so I just didn't. But like your home page is generally known as the index, and it should just be index.html in general. So if you're using Visual Studio Code or any other editor with Emmet built in, you can type the bang, the exclamation point. It's an Emmet abbreviation for this sort of setup, and hit tab, and you get this. So what the heck just happened? Well, we're already familiar with the HTML head and body tags. We've seen that before. We've seen title. But now we've got this and this. We've got like this lang attribute. We've got this stuff. This is syntax I literally always have to Google, but is generally accepted as best practice to include, so you should include it. Doc type HTML defines what type of document it is, and I know that you're thinking, well, but HTML already says that. But turns out there are different versions of HTML that do different things differently. So doc type HTML is the standard that you should use. Lang equals en is English. You should just define that you're writing in English, or there's different language codes for different languages. Look one up for whatever the language you're writing in is. Char set equals UTF-8. I don't really want to explain Unicode at the moment, so like whatever. It's there's different ways to store text in the computing world. One of them is Unicode, and UTF-8 is like the standard on the internet, so you should go with it unless you have a specific reason not to. This is interesting. This tag right here, if you've ever used like an older iPhone or like an iPhone and visited a website that wasn't made like with mobile in mind, like especially back when smartphones were first a thing, remember how they used to zoom everything out? This tag, meta name equals viewport, content equals width equals device width, initial scale equals 1, forces phones to not zoom out. It says, no, don't zoom out, just show everything the correct size. And this prevents Internet Explorer from being weird. And we've already seen title before. So that's it. That's just, you know, if you're using a real website in production, like in the real world, you're going to deploy this, you should set these things. Okay, but back to our learning one. We have this beautiful website. How the heck do we put it on the internet? Well, we have a URL, yes, but localhost means the computer that you're sitting in front of. So if you sent someone this link, they'd click it and then it'd be like, it wouldn't work unless they were on the same computer as you, in which case, what do you have, 2 keyboards? Like, that doesn't make any sense. You need a host. And all that means is you need somebody to take your HTML file and your image files and your CSS files and just like make it so that they're available to the internet. And the way they do that is whenever I visit a website with my web browser, in this case Firefox, but in your case it might be Chrome or whatever, it's going to send a request to a service called the domain name service. So let's say I type in google.com. Foof. What's going to happen is my web browser is going to make a request to the domain name service, and it's going to look up the address of google.com. So by default, every computer on the internet has what's known as an IP address, an internet protocol address, and it's a bunch of numbers. And as you know, when I go to Google, I'm not typing a bunch of numbers, I'm typing Google. So the domain name service simply stores, it's like an address book. It says, all right, google.com is at this IP address. So when you type in an address, it's going to make that request, get the address it needs to go to, and then make a request to that address and say, hey, computer living at this address, I'm looking for google.com. And then that computer living at that address is going to say, oh, I've got google.com, here you go. And it's going to send the code. It's going to send the code just like we've been typing over here, except probably more complex. So that happens, and then it loads and renders and whatever. Hooray. So the 2 things you need in order to get your very, very basic website online are a host, to someone to run a computer at an address that gives you your website, and a domain name, which is a mapping between words and an address, because you don't want to tell people to type in like a bunch of numbers. You want people to type in a website. So I have chuckdrees.com. This is my website. I host it myself on a Namecheap server, but there are free ways to host your website. So like, I have a server that delivers the pages, and I have a domain name, chuckdrees.com, which points to that server. I'm not going to go into the specifics of how to set things up right now, but I would recommend, if you're looking for the cheapest way to get a website on the internet, Namecheap for the domain, and GitHub Pages to simply host the thing. And Namecheap has a good tutorial on how to use it with GitHub Pages and things of that nature. And if there's interest, I can go into more detail in how to set that up. I think in a future video, I'm probably going to go over Git. Let's see. I think I'll do that next Saturday. Yeah. So I think we've covered everything I wanted to do today. Oh, right. Okay. So, all 10 of you. Wow, we have 10 whole people. This is exciting, guys. Um, I want to hear back from you guys. Has this been interesting? This is the first time I've ever done a tutorial on, Twitch. So I'm kind of curious as to how I'm doing. Feel free to just leave a message in chat or send me an email, which I'm sending to chat right now. That is my email address. Feel free to email me. And if I were to do another stream around 8 a.m. next Saturday, would that be interesting? Would we want to do episode 2? Do we want to follow up? Do we want to learn Java? Do we want to learn something else? Should I do it tomorrow? I'm kind of planning on next Saturday. I think that would be chill. Yeah, drop me a line and let me know how it's going, how I'm doing. There's a fly. Yeah. We've covered everything I wanted to. Hopefully you're at least somewhat familiar with HTML. I can't emphasize enough, you can't memorize all these tags just by like sheer force of will. You just have to practice. And a good way to practice is by trying to emulate the websites that other people have made. So one intro activity that I really like is the WordPress default theme. The newer themes are actually kind of hard to emulate, but the older ones are easier. 2015, I think. Let's see, 2016, 2015. Oh, it's not loading. Really? Haha. No. 2014. Basically what I'm saying is you should go out and try to emulate a website that you've seen in the real world, and the WordPress themes are a really easy place to start. There's one in particular that I'm trying to remember. Is it 2012? Really? Has it been that long? Ha! Here it is. So what I'm going to say is, in my opinion, take a look at this. This is obviously very, there's a lot of stuff here, but just take a look at the general aesthetic and see if you can recreate it to some degree. And, I'd say use inspect element as a last resort, just to see what they're doing. You don't have to use all the tags they're doing. You don't have to do things the same way, but try to achieve the feeling of like a title, some links, and like a sheet of paper almost. Oh, I should mention, you can see how a given element is being styled on the right side of this inspector panel. And this is the same in Chrome and Firefox. It just looks a little different. You can look at the rules, like the specific rules in the code that they're following, and you can see the little strike through on rules that are being overridden by more specific rules. I didn't go into cascading. I'll do that next time. And you can look at computed to see exactly what's being applied. You can look at the box model. Remember I talked about margin, border, padding, all that stuff? You can look at it right there. It's all handy. And if no one has any other questions in chat or anything to say, I think it's time for me to go. It's been about an hour, I think. When did I start streaming? I have no idea. I started streaming about an hour ago. Okay. Make sure to stay hydrated. Yes, I can go through margin and padding. That is something that will make the best of us go crazy. So, let me just set this up. I'm going to make a new file called margin.html, just so we don't have to clutter up. I think I'm going to probably post all this stuff on GitHub later so that you guys can like see my specific code, probably for the YouTube audience. But yeah, so we'll call this document margin, and let's go ahead and go over to margin.html. Okay, So real quick, let's just get an H1 out here, margin demos. We'll do a couple divs, just so that we have some stuff to work with. 1, div 2, div 3, div 4. For the sake of convenience, I don't recommend doing this regularly, but you can actually put styles directly in the HTML tag just to sort of prototype, but I don't recommend doing that for like a real website because it gets kind of messy and kind of hard to keep track of. So I'm just going to really quickly make a style tag for div border 1 px solid black, so we can see every div clearly. And I'm just going to start defining styles in here. Style equals 10 pixels. So I should probably just copy paste. Y2F that. All right, so off the bat, a margin simply defines the space between one thing and another thing. But it can get kind of complex keeping track of what has margin and where margin is coming from. So how do I want to do this? Let's delete the margin from these two elements so you can clearly see that the margin provided, so like this div 2, you can clearly see that it has 10 pixels. Well, not that I expect you to know exactly what 10 pixels is or how big 10 pixels is, but you can see there's some space on either side and it's roughly equivalent. If I were to make this like 30 pixels, it gets larger. And so by default, margin applies to all sides. So you have top margin, bottom margin, left margin, and right margin. But you can set them manually. You can say margin top. Oops, I don't know what just happened there. You can say margin dash top, and then the margin will only apply to the top. You can say margin dash bottom. Margin will only apply to the bottom. You can mix and match these. You can say margin top 10 pixels and margin bottom equals 30, as I've just done here, and you can see it's got more space on the bottom than the top. But I like the shorthand way to do this, which is either a single value, like I said, will apply to all sides, but if you want to apply to different sides, you can put up to 4 values in here. And the way it goes is top, right, bottom, left, like a clock. So top, right, bottom, left. It looks the same because they were already 10 anyway, but let's say the right and left, we wanted to have 20 pixels. Let's say we wanted like 60 pixels from the left, or 100. Whoops, that's too much. Or like, say, 200. You can see we're pushing stuff off to the side over here. We're shrinking from that side. Or I don't know if my camera is flipped or not. I just realized, but we're shrinking from the right side, my right and your right as you're looking at the screen. What else? I don't really want to go into like collapse behavior specifically, so but I can show a div within a div. So let me just take this div 2. Let me just I'm gonna do something a little tricky here. So all I've done is I rearranged the ending div tags so that now we've got this div and this div is inside of it. So we've got div 2 is our sort of outer div, and it has a margin 10, 200, 10, 20, which is top 10, right 200, bottom 10, left 20. Yes, left 20. So you can see that our inner div is constrained by the size of our outer div. And that's the way things work in general. Things inherit the size of their children. They'll only be, or their parents, excuse me. They'll only be as big as their parent unless you explicitly tell them otherwise. But if we gave this inner div some margin, you can see that now there's space around it as well. It's going to resize itself in order to ensure that there is 10 pixels all around it. So that is margin in a nutshell. It's the space around the outside of an element. And if we go ahead and inspect this, you can see the amount of margin for this div is 10, 10, 10, 10. And if we click out to the other div, we can see it's calculated at 10, 200, 10, 20. And you can even see if you hover, the yellow box is the space outside the margin, if that makes sense, which is kind of nice to see. So I guess the next natural thing to go over is padding. And padding is kind of the opposite of margin, if you want to think of it that way. It's kind of a weird thing to say. But if margin is the space around the outside of something, padding is the space around the content that's inside of something, or between the border and the stuff inside. And it's easier to just show than it is to explain. So if you look at this, you see how all the text is like butted up right against the edge? A padding would separate that. So if I just apply 10 pixels of padding to every div, you can see now there's a little bit of breathing room between the content and the div itself. So and of course you can set that 10, 10, 10, 10. You can use 4 values in the shorthand way that I showed here in the same sort of manner. This brings up a good point now, is that you see this div within div2, the smaller div, has 20 pixels of space between it and the edge of the div it's inside of. But 10 of those come from the margin on it. As you can see by this yellow box, it only goes, I wish I could like point at the screen, but I'm on a camera. The yellow box only goes to about halfway. And then you'll see here that the purple box, which is padding, is the other half of that distance. So that's something that's really kind of tricky to keep track of when you're designing in the real world, is when you have like space that you didn't intend or space that you don't want, whether that's margin or padding. Does that make sense? Have I answered any questions you might have? Oh, by the way, if you want to be really retro, you can do dotted borders or dashed borders. Yeah, of course. Solid is the standard. Any other questions? I'm just gonna start doing some fun stuff. Y'all ever heard of border radius? Border-radius is only supported on more modern browsers, but it gives you the ability to round corners. Rounded corners. You can make a circle by we can make a circle by saying width, by defining the width and height, and the border radius to be the same, I think. Nope, I was wrong. Wait, really? Huh, maybe double? There we go, that's a circle. If you wanted to make a picture of yourself with a circle, that is a really good question. Okay, so let's go background images.html. So the image tag, I actually kind of forgot to go over the image tag in detail. That's all right. So let's just call this images. IMGs. Images. Let's make a quick IMG. Source equals me.jpg. Pictures /me.jpg. And let's go ahead and go to it. Background images. So I have a folder called pictures that I set up for this tutorial, and one of them is me.jpg. And it's a huge photo of me speaking at a hackathon. So we could do some basic stuff. We could style it just a bit. You could say IMG, width 200 pixels, just so it fits on the page. So something to note about image tags, which is the sort of de facto way to show an image, is that they can be sized with either width or height, and they'll keep their aspect ratio. They won't squish or shrink, or they'll resize, they'll shrink or expand, but they won't squish in like a way that changes the way the image looks, unless you define both height and width. So if you say width 300 pixels, all of a sudden it's squished. We don't want that. So, and of course you can give it a border radius, 300 pixels, to make it like an oval. But let's say your images aren't always square. What do you do then? The answer is that you, instead of using an image, which is fixed to the aspect ratio of the image that you're giving it, you use a div, which, as we've seen before, divs are just boxes. They're really the bread and butter of HTML. You can do whatever the heck you want with them, and very importantly, they can be whatever size you want, and you can set a background image to them. So let's go over how to do that. So real quick, let's just say div. We could use an identifier, but because we're only going to put one div on this page, that's okay. We'll say width 400 pixels, height 400 pixels, border just so we can see it, 1px solid black. And let's go ahead and put a div in. We accidentally styled the little browser sync notification div. That's funny. We'll call this one ID equals picture. Yeah, and then we'll just do div hashtag picture. Oh, I didn't mention this originally, but if you want to combine like classes and element names, you can. You can say div dot whatever to say divs of a certain class or things like that. All right, and let's give it a border radius. Did we decide it needed to be 800 pixels in order to be a circle? Yes. Okay. So we can fill it with an image by saying background image. And then the syntax on this is a little bit weird, and you can Google it if you ever need help. URL parentheses, and then the URL of the image, pictures/me.jpg. And of course, that is that picture, but it's just the grainy, blurry top left corner because that picture is huge, because the photographer blew it up in post for some reason. So background, the next thing you're going to need to do is background size is cover. So it fits. There's two. Cover is one. The other is contain. And contain will make sure it fits entirely, but we don't want that. We want it to crop. We want it to cover. And background position, center, center. If I could type, center, center. And so that's the horizontal and vertical position. So now we've created, and we can get rid of this now because we don't actually need it. We've created a circle with my picture on it, which is kind of cool. And actually, there's a really cool trick that's really popular in web design right now that I want to show you. So really quickly, don't ever use this in the real world because you shouldn't. There's a concept called semantic tags, which says that the structure of your document should sort of describe the content in a way. So you should use things like H1 and nav and P for paragraph and A for link. But there are also tags that are there purely for aesthetics, and one of them is called BR, and literally it doesn't do anything. It just creates a new line. which normally you would use a paragraph for or something like that. But when we're just prototyping and screwing around, it's a really easy way to just make space. So let's make like 20 or 30 breaks and push this down here. And let's, actually no, we're not gonna do this. This feels gross, I'm sorry. BR exists, we're just gonna use margin. So margin top, let's make it 600 pixels, margin bottom 6. Well, why don't I just use the shorthand I just showed you? Top, right, bottom, left. So what I've just done is I've centered an image of me on this long scrolly page, and the reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to show you this really, really cool thing. Background attachment fixed. So now, you wouldn't want to use this on a photo of a person, but yeah, that's how they do that. But you'll notice the image got a lot bigger because now when we say cover, we don't just have to cover the area of the circle, we have to cover the area of the entire browser window. Which is, you know, bigger. It's bigger than the circle. But yeah, I've actually used this in high school. I was on my like robotics team, and they've actually sort of butchered the website in a way I'm really unhappy with, but the core is still there. We had these cool sort of robot slides with pictures of our robots, which I think I kind of overdid it with this effect because I had just discovered it, but it's a thing. I don't know. I can't think of anyone that uses it right now, but I've seen it before. Ooh, you know what? There's this really cool New York Times article that uses a similar effect, but actually is accomplished very differently. Okay, so what they do is they actually load IMG tags with position absolute and fade them in and out. Oh, also, I should probably mark my stream as mature audiences. Yeah, parallax. So the interesting thing about parallax is like, there are different ways to try to achieve like the true parallax, which is oh, here we go. So real quick, technically true parallax defines things scrolling at different speeds, but if that speed is not scrolling at all, then it's really simple, just background attachment fixed. But if you wanted to like do like multiple different speeds, like you can see here, some things scrolling faster than others, there's like a couple different techniques to do it. It's a little bit complicated. Do I have any plugins for Visual Studio Code? Yeah, I have a few. Let's see. Beautify is actually built in, but the Beautify plugin lets you configure exactly how it works. I have these two C# plugins, which I use for Unity. I have C++, which I use for algorithms homework. Debugger for Chrome and debugger for Unity and Chrome, respectively. Editor config, I don't actually use that. It's for syncing your settings between multiple computers, but I sync my settings in a different way. What do I actually use? Get history is really handy. This I have stopped using because they have a built-in one now. I don't use OneDark Pro. I do use SAS. I use Studio Icons. I use Unity tools. I do a lot of work in a front-end framework called Vue, and Viter is a really nice thing. And okay, the one plugin that I could not live without is the Vim plugin. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Vim and how Vim works, but the basic idea is that when you're typing, instead of just like typing letters by default, you're in like a non-typing mode, and then you have to enter a typing mode. And what that means is I can do things like move the cursor or like copy and paste using keyboard commands like home row keys. And I just did a terrible job of explaining it, but it makes working so much nicer. I don't really want to teach you Vim right now. It's kind of complicated. There's a lot of really good tutorials online on how to use Vim, but yeah. The Vim plugin on Visual Studio Code is excellent. That's actually why I use Visual Studio Code instead of like Atom or anything else, because their Vim plugin is so good. In fact, I've started working on a branch, a fork of their Vim plugin that integrates the sort of tree style undo with directly with the editor, and it's actually quite nice, and I'm kind of excited about it. Anyway, stop looking at my gross belly. VS Code or NetBeans? So I wouldn't say that one is better than the other, because they're meant for different things. Visual Studio Code is a text editor. It's a very powerful text editor. It's a very good text editor, but at its core, it's just a text editor. And the idea is, if you want it to do things like build and run your programs, you can set it to do that, but out of the box, it doesn't. All it does is edit text and provide the tools for you to customize it to automate and do things that you want. NetBeans is what's known as an integrated development environment. It's an IDE, which means it contains a text editor, but it also contains tools like already built in and configured to work with your compiler and run your code. So NetBeans specifically is for Java, and Java, you need to compile your code with Java-C and then run it with the Java runtime. And you could do that by hand manually, or you could set up a script for Visual Studio Code to do it for you, but NetBeans does it out of the box. If you're going to get serious about developing in Java, I might give Visual Studio Code a shot, but if you're just learning Java for school or something, NetBeans or Eclipse is going to be a lot simpler to start with. And another thing to mention is that different sort of types of programmers prefer different tools. So like the JavaScript world that I'm a part of, the front-end development world that does websites and stuff, we prefer plain text editors because traditionally the languages we write in don't have compilers or don't have to be, processed in any sort of way. But like Java tends to be used in really, really large, like winding, huge programs. Same thing with C++ and stuff like that. Tends to be used in these large code bases where having all the features of an IDE, things like built-in compiling and unit test support and like refactoring and like the IDE knowing everything about your whole code base can make that a lot easier. So they're different. I would stick with NetBeans for now. Learn how to compile your Java code in the command line. Learn how to use Java-C and Java, just because I never like to let my editor be smarter than I am, just as a rule. But for day-to-day stuff, I think I'd probably use an IDE if I were a serious Java developer. But like for C# is very similar to Java, but I use Visual Studio Code for it because I'm working within Unity. So Unity handles compiling the code and all that stuff, and all I need to do is type it. So I, stick to. Actually, you know what? We can learn some Java right now. Why not, right? I have Java-C installed. Beautiful. So I'm not going to put this on GitHub just because this is kind of not related, and I'll probably end the video here if I end up uploading it to YouTube. Any plugin that finishes lines for you. I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you mean like the HTML tags, like a begin tag, end tag, Emmet does that for you. So if you use the Emmet abbreviation instead of the actual tag, then it does that. If you're talking about semicolons at the end of like script files, I don't know if that exists. But just a real quick primer on Java. Let's just do like hello.java. I have the extension pack. Oh, I don't. I don't ever write Java. I learned it freshman year of college and never looked back. Anyway, public class hello. Public, let's see if I remember my Java. Void main string args. I think that's right. System.out.println hello world. So Emmet is actually built into Visual Studio Code, but EMMET, yes. But it's available for other editors as plugins as well. Sublime, Atom, Brackets. If you are already a programmer and use one of these, then Emmet is the tool for you. And let's just reload real quick so I can get the... All right, so this is the most basic. This is the most basic hello world, I think, if I've done that right. So with Java, you compile it first. Java C is the command for that. Hello.java. Oh, I'm an idiot. Rename hello.java. There we go. Haha! And then you do Java hello.class. What? Oh, there we go. Cool. Yay, I did it. I remember. So you should know how to compile your code in the command line, just because it's good to know, but I don't recommend making a habit of it if you're doing a lot of complex stuff. There are a lot of very good automation tools to do these things for you. And yeah. Speaking of VS Code, I discovered something on my laptop that I want to install. Base 16 themes. Reload. These are some really nice themes. 3 weeks ago, lol. Yep. Well, it's so weird. I go to ASU, and when I was learning how to program, they told us, download NetBeans, press the green button, and just trust us. And they never went over command line stuff, and it's so frustrating. Especially if you're trying to, like they would give us test cases. They'd give us, here's an input file, here's an output file. Your output should match this file. And it's so easy to automate that in the command line, unless you don't teach people how to use the command line. I don't know. I have a lot of complaints about how I was taught programming in computer science, which is part of why I believe I'm a pretty good teacher, but I don't know. Anyway, dark 80s. Oh yeah, that looks nice. I'm sticking with that. But yeah, and that's why people use it, is because it does make that easy. And especially like when you're first trying to teach someone how to code, it can be really overwhelming, especially if they're not very good with computers, and you don't want to muddy up the experience by like trying to get them to learn how to use command line and stuff. And I totally understand that. I mean, when I first started this tutorial that we're going over right now, I started with Notepad, and then I waited until I had the basics before I went down into like build tooling and stuff. But yeah. Let's talk about Emmet some more. Let's see. HTML. So Emmet, of course, the Bang extension gives you that. Oh, did I ever explain what I'm doing? So you type an Emmet snippet, and then you press tab to expand it. I don't think I actually explained that. Oh gosh, I feel really bad now. So like if you need a div, you type div, and then you hit tab to make a div. If you need 10 divs, you hit tab times 10, times being the star in most programming languages. Hit tab, you get 10 divs. If you want something like UL, like a list with 30 items, li, let's say 15 links, you can do that, which is really handy. I mean, holy crap, that saved me so much typing. Hello. I actually really love assembly. Okay, so I am a JavaScript programmer, which is about as far from assembly as you can get. And I actually do really enjoy JavaScript. It gets a lot of hate on the internet, but I don't know if that's entirely warranted. But I had a class in assembly, and I just really enjoyed it. And I got the impression that a lot of my friends hated it and just wanted it to be over. But like, what was the name of the game that was playing this? Human Resource Machine. Oh, yes. This game is like programming assembly. Like, here it is. So, honestly, I think I liked assembly as much as I did because I played this game. Can we get gameplay, please? Anyway, yeah, so you just, like, get very granular instructions. It's all about just knowing how to frame a problem and thinking it through clearly, and that's just not something everyone knows how to do, and that's, you know what, that's fine. We're all good at different things. Oh yeah, here's my 30 links. Can I add you on Discord if you get some questions after you stream? Sure. Sure thing. Let's see my profile. I don't want to disable it because I don't want to reveal. Hold on, let me go off camera real quick. Let me grab my Discord link. I suppose I should put that into my Twitch description, shouldn't I? I'm also available on Twitter. All right. Let's see. I'm going to post my channel feed because that's a thing, right? So, Discord, Twitter, trees, email, chuck@chickeries.com. Actually, I'm going to give you guys my real Twitter. Just know that I'm super liberal and I tend to like retweet stuff that's fairly political, so if you're not into that, just don't follow me, and that's totally fine. It's okay to have different opinions, but yeah, my contact information is now below the video that is playing right now, like down on the left in my screen at least. Does it look like this for everyone? I'm kind of curious. Oh. What? Where's the thing? Where's the... I have a thing on my screen. I don't have it in this screen. What? I'm so confused. Well, there's that. In chat, at least. How do I turn that on? Anyone here really familiar with how Twitch works? Okay. Settings, probably? Probably under channel and video, right? I might as well show this while I'm going. Host list. I don't want to turn that on. I'm just going to have to keep myself from cursing. Okay, I'm really confused. Look at this, though. If you look at me, I have like this thing going on down here. You know what I mean? Do you guys see this? Do I happen to know any Java tutorials for beginners? Not off the top of my head. Like I said, I learned Java in a university class. So, the issue is that all the Java documentation, whenever you Google something, is horrible. Like, so bad. And I don't understand why. And unfortunately, I don't think I can help you there. You can't find me on Discord. Really? Let's try that again. Discord. Let's edit panels. Contact me. I'll just copy this over, I guess. I know it looks like I'm not doing anything, but that's because I'm working on my second screen. There we go. All right, let's see. I got a Discord notification. Pending. Are you Rudy himself? Yes, you are. Hello. All right. Happy Saturday morning, everyone. This has been a really great thing. I think I'm going to do this every Saturday. I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. If you're just joining us, I just go through a bunch of tutorials in Java in general. You'll probably find stuff explained different ways by everyone, but it all kind of ties together. The more you read, the more experiment and fail. That is a good point. Really big things in learning how to program is experimenting and failing, and just looking at code that other people have written, because the more you see other people's code, the more you sort of get it. I've noticed in a very direct way. And yeah, like I said, I think it's probably time to log off at this point. I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and also I hope that I also hope that you'll join me next week. Is this a good time? Should I probably start at 9 instead of 8? Because it seems like a lot more people showed up around 9, and it is Saturday morning, so I can totally understand. I can totally understand that, people aren't waking up early on a Saturday to go hard on a Friday night. So if you guys could just email me real quick, just let me know how I did. Feedback is appreciated, and I guess I'll see you next Saturday. How do we want to handle communication for this class? Am I running a class? I don't know. I feel like I should post my code examples online or something, right? Well, I'll figure it out. By next week, I will have maybe a website set up for this experiment we're doing or something. I'll probably have either a forum or like a Slack or a Discord or something like that. So yeah, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Oh, that's wrong. It's not starting. Just ended. I should just go offline. I don't know why I'm... Oh, I didn't... Whatever. Whatever. This is a good time to stop. Peace out, guys. It's been real.